All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us for Human Rights Are Women's Rights with the Clinton Presidential Library. Back on September 5th, 1995, then First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton spoke at the 4th United Nations Conference on Women in Beijing, China. Her speech included the memorable phrase, "Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights." This program will examine her rhetoric and the behind-the-scenes speechwriting process through records from the Clinton administration. And this presentation is led by Kathleen Pate, who's the education specialist for the Bill Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. So all 50 of us or so, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Kathleen for joining us this afternoon. And Kathleen, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Super excited to be here. I normally present to K-12 students and teachers. So if I say anything like, "That's a great question," just know I've gone into teacher mode, but I'll try to keep it more aimed at an adult audience. All right. So we are going to consider this speech. It is a very memorable refrain. So much so I wore this shirt in particular today because it actually says it's human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. We sell this in the museum store. All right, so let's think a little bit about where this speech took place. So as Robert mentioned, this was the 4th UN Conference on Women. And it was in 1995, so 30 years ago in 2020, which is significant because it also marked the 75th anniversary of the 19th Amendment being added to the Constitution. So it was a big deal that the conference was happening in Beijing. People, citizens, politicians on the left and on the right were concerned about the message it would send. One, if the United States sent a delegation, and two, if that delegation was led by the First Lady. So let's think about what was happening there. So China offered to host it in Beijing, right? The site of the Tiananmen Square protest. It was controversial. China does not have the best record on human rights. In particular, women and girls and policies related to the one child, the limit of having one child. All right, so UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright, UN Ambassador to the United Nations, Madeleine Albright, chaired with Hillary Rodham Clinton as the honorary chair. And this is a letter, June 1944. This is from the Association for Women in Science. And they're urging President Clinton to appoint Hillary to the delegation as the honorary chair. And this is what they are saying, right? Hillary Rodham Clinton is a respected role model for women in America and throughout the world. Her lifetime leadership on children's, family, and women's issues is exemplified by the defining role she has played in healthcare reform. Right, so you have to think President Clinton took office in January of 1993, and you might remember that as they say in the letter, First Lady Hillary Clinton played a significant role in the attempts at healthcare reform. Wasn't particularly successful, but she really showed herself as someone who was interested in policy and passionate about that work. We also believe that our U.S. delegation should include diverse and experienced NGO representatives who have carried these issues into the American mainstream and built international networks. All right, so there were members of Congress who threatened to block funding. This letter in particular is from a Republican representative, and he is particularly concerned, speaking for thousands in Georgia's 7th Congressional District and for myself, an American presence at the conference would be wrong because it both endorses and promotes a radical feminist agenda that is anti-family and pro-abortion. Right, so I mentioned there were concerns on the right and on the left. So here's what we're getting on the right. On the left, other members of Congress were concerned about China's human rights abuses. And members of the State Department were concerned about the diplomatic relationship with China. So we can see, so all of the documents that I'm showing you are from our records that we hold here at the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. And so I tend to put the full page and then make it bigger so we can read and see what's going on. And here's 2 paragraphs that kind of let you know Nancy Pelosi is very upset that we may send the First Lady. Her concern is China's human rights abuses. Susan Brophy knows about Pelosi's concerns, as do the State Department and the UN staff. And then if you look at the second paragraph, Iris says the State Department didn't want to brief them until there was more to say. So there are other senators who are, so those are representatives, and then there are senators who are concerned. Their only concerns are logistical and organizational. They didn't raise the human rights concern. Right, so we're getting this tension from both sides of the aisle. All right, so to make matters worse, this conference is set for September 5th, 1995. In June, a Chinese American activist, Harry Wu, is arrested. And people who were maybe on the fence before, there's now public outcry, right? We cannot have a foreign government arresting a Chinese American, holding him, right? And have the First Lady go there, right? That suggests that we are okay with that. All right, so here is a letter, obviously handwritten. And it's very, you can, with the underlines, you can see the person who's writing this is very much in support of Hillary Clinton attending the conference. Your presence at the women's conference, actually that may just say woman conference. Your presence at the woman conference would benefit the mass of women. You not going will, and it's will is written twice, so I'm only going to say it once. You not going will only benefit one man. And I really like this letter because after she signs her name, underneath parenthetically, she writes, I did not vote for Bill Clinton, no politics involved. So she wants the First Lady to know that her going is going to benefit a number of women. Her not going is only going to benefit Harry Wu. And she also wants Hillary Clinton to know she didn't vote for Bill Clinton, right? This is not about politics for her. Okay, so good news. Hillary Clinton is adamant about going. Even with the arrest of Harry Wu. And so she is making plans, trying to figure out if she can pull this off. But the president, at the end of the day, the president is going to be the one to make this decision. Now, in August, right? So we're talking August of 95. This thing is happening September 5th, 1995. Wu is convicted and expelled from China rather than imprisoned. And so this memo, originally declassified, I want to point out the date here. You look in that corner, you can see it is August 24th, 1995. And the stamp here says the president has seen, and that date is August 26th, 1995. So this is a memo, purpose of which is to obtain your approval of the First Lady's participation at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, and to obtain agreement to decline a meeting with Harry Wu. The State Department concurs. And so they're now recommending that since Harry Wu has been expelled from China rather than imprisoned, we believe the major obstacle to Mrs. Clinton's participation has been removed. We recommend that she travel to Beijing for the women's conference. I do want to point out, this is a declassified memo, and you can see that down at the bottom. It says declassified, right? And I am not an archivist. This is not what I do for my job, but my understanding from the archival staff is that documents can only be declassified by the agency that created them, right? So if this was created by NSA advisor, National Security Advisor Tony Lake, then NSA would be the one to declassify. All right, so I want to point out their schedule, right? We saw the president, that was written on August 24th. The date that it shows the president saw it was August 26th. August 26th, marking the 75th anniversary of the addition of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And you'll notice a couple of things about this calendar. And this is the calendar for First Lady, but the president is actually with her. They are in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They are on vacation. Part of the reason they are on vacation is because there is a congressional recess. So the Clintons typically took vacations in August. Also of note, August 19th is President Clinton's birthday. That'd be a great time to travel. And coincidentally, it worked out great. That put them in Jackson, Wyoming for the 75th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And Wyoming is one of the states, when they came in as a territory, they allowed women to vote. So that was a perfect place for them to together give her, then him, give a speech commemorating that significant anniversary. All right, so there's that date. I forgot I had circled it and made it bigger. All right, so this photograph, this is them in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at a campfire, and they are discussing her going to Beijing. Like, this is where they're making the decision. And you all are probably aware of this as adults, but one of the things that I like to point out to students is they're on vacation, but you are never not president. And I know that's a double negative, and for that I apologize, but you're always president. You're always having to make decisions. You're never truly on vacation. All right, so you would think once the decision was made that she was going to go, that she would have focused all of her energy on preparing for that, getting that speech written, getting all those points down, But no, when you are the first lady, when you are the president, you go straight from vacation in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and you go to Hawaii. Why are they going to Hawaii? Well, 1995 marks the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. So if you look at the Clinton administration, you see a lot of commemorations of things that happened during World War II. So in this case, they go to Pearl Harbor for this, they go to Hawaii for this World War II remembrance. And they do that on the 1st, the 2nd, then they're in Guam on their way to Beijing. Now, this is where the president's schedule deviates, right? He does not go to Guam. He does not go to Beijing. So she's not even back at the White House. So her team of speechwriters are working on this speech, and it goes through many, many drafts. And the interesting thing is, it's not until the later drafts where we see that memorable refrain added in. All right, so this is the 4th draft. And if you look, I'm going to go back for just a second. Actually, you can't tell what date it was written because that's the date of the speech. But what you can see is that Hillary that's her handwriting. Those little notes on there are her handwriting. Right, by gathering in Beijing, we are focusing world attention on issues that matter most in the lives of women and their families. And you can see she's made a few changes. She's going to pop that bottom paragraph above that second to the last. She's going to mention there are some who wonder why the lives of women and girls matter to economic and political progress. And she's saying there are some who wonder whether the lives of women and girls matter to economic and political progress around the globe. And this edition here, there were additional sessions outside of Beijing. So that is another place. All right, so the day finally comes, September 5th, 1995. The 1,500 people, huge delegates from around the globe. And in her autobiography, she describes she was unprepared for the silence of the crowd. But you have to think about the people who were in the audience. The people who are in the audience are not necessarily listening to her directly as much as they are listening to interpreters. So there's this delay, right? So people are focused on hearing the translation of her speech. And it is when the refrain, where she starts to repeat the phrase, women's rights and human rights. And as she goes through, the crowd erupts. So much so that there were Secret Service who, when the crowd first erupted outside of the hall where she was speaking, the noise was so loud that they thought something bad had happened. So this is her giving the keynote address. And I want to point out, I want you to look at what she's wearing and how her hair is styled, right? I've actually done a presentation about Hillary's hair and about how her hairstyle changed, not just in the 8 years that President Clinton was in office, but over her lifetime. And this style is particularly feminine. I look at it as a nod to Marlo Thomas and That Girl, right? Because she's got the little flip going on. She's also wearing a suit. It's pink, it's boucle, that's the fabric, it's kind of nubby. It's got gold buttons. And I think you can see in this, no, you can't see through the podium, but in this, okay. It's a suit and it has a skirt, and I think you'll see the skirt later. But I think it's particularly interesting that she chose to give such a dynamic speech about women's rights, but to also dress in a very, very classic, very feminine way. All right, so we're going to watch a little bit of the speech here.
I believe that now, on the eve of a new millennium, it is time to break the silence. It is time for us to say here in Beijing, and for the world to hear, that it is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
Right, so that's just a short clip of that video. Let me see if I can get back into the slides without playing it twice. All right, so there you can see the suit, you can see the skirt that matches the jacket. So she lists in the speech, in the refrain, she is listing things that are not acceptable. Some of these are human rights violations that clearly reference the Chinese government. So the feed that's coming out from the hall is cut, it is censored. People in China do not hear this speech. They don't. Here she is visiting with the press after the keynote address. So people on all sides, some people criticized her because they felt like the speech really didn't do anything to help women in China. Now, other people were particularly impressed on the bold stance that she took. Now, what came out of this, the UN, and not anonymously, unanimously adopted the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action that is still in use today. All right, so Hillary Clinton continued to be a force during the Clinton presidency as First Lady. She engaged in advocacy, both domestic and foreign. She worked with women around the globe to, like women in Northern Ireland, bringing women together to work for peace around the globe. It led to the founding of an organization, a non-governmental organization called Vital Voices that still exists today. All right, so I think I may have accidentally gone a little bit quicker than I intended. So that was probably closer to 27, 25 minutes. But I would be delighted to answer questions.
Yeah, no, that's timing was fine for me. It's always better if you go a little you're a little less than a little over, a little short than a little over. So that this is fine. So if anyone has any questions for Kathleen, please type them into the Q&A. If you have any comments for Kathleen, please type them into the chat. Now is the time, folks. And while we wait for any questions, I did want to again thank the partnering libraries, Shutesbury, Foxborough, Needham, Amherst, and Hanover. Okay, let's see. Still waiting on questions and comments. Hopefully I have the settings correct. I do have a question. Actually, there were two questions that were emailed to me before the meeting.
Okay.
So I have them on a separate screen. Okay, so Bernice writes, besides Eleanor Roosevelt, Hillary Clinton is the most outstanding first lady we've ever had. My question is, do you know if Hillary Clinton is still accepting speaking engagements abroad as well as in this country? I wish I had heard more about her. Does she continue to be politically active? I remember this speech in China. I campaigned for her back in 2008 and in 2016, and I first saw her and Bill in 1992 when they were with Mayor Ed Randell near City Hall in Philadelphia. I was too timid to approach them at the time, and I still regret that lost opportunity. Hopefully I didn't read too much, Bernice, but so Bernice's question essentially is, does Hillary still do speaking engagements, both domestically and abroad? Did you hear that? Did you hear the question, Kathleen?
I did. I didn't hear the very end. What happens is sometimes when I'm do things on my computer, it will actually turn the sound off and then it will turn my microphone off.
So the question is, does Hillary Clinton still do public speaking engagements in the US and abroad?
Right. And so that is why I had gone into some slides that I had skipped in the presentation. I skipped these slides because they're about an exhibit that closed at the end of April, so a couple of weeks ago. But we had an exhibit called Women's Voices, Women's Votes, Women's Rights. And in that exhibit, we looked at, it kind of started with the 1830s, 1840s, women in the abolitionist movement, and that grew into the suffrage movement. We had a copy of actually an 1848 newspaper from Long Island with the Declaration of Sentiments in it. So from Seneca Falls, the Seneca Falls Convention, and it was in a case next to the first page of the Beijing speech. So it kind of drew parallels in women finding their voice, women getting the vote, Hillary Clinton speaking out for women's rights, and then it took an international turn. And I'm telling you about the exhibit so that it makes sense when I tell you that we had a summit at the library in December. And so in the photograph on the left is Dr. Chelsea Clinton. In the middle is Secretary Hillary Clinton. And on the right is the Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, which is a part of the University of Arkansas system that offers a master's degree in public service. And so they convened leaders, women leaders from across the globe, from across the country to talk about different topics here at the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. Hillary Clinton is still quite active, as is President Clinton. President Clinton and Secretary Clinton were in Ireland a couple of weeks ago to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday agreements. So very active, still speaking, still doing things like that, still involved in working to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. So right. Lois, oh, go ahead, Kathleen, sorry.
Oh, I see it. I see it in the Q&A. Lois, were there any reactions post-speech from the people who didn't want her to attend in the first place, either from the left or from the right? You saw a little bit of the criticism. People did criticize kind of yeah, you said some great things, but no one in China heard it. Like that was one of the responses. I will say it's interesting. I'm going to share a different screen here. So there are two resources that you might want to be aware of. And one is the Clinton Digital Library. And so this is every record that we have that has been reviewed, released, and digitized. And so digital library exhibits, there's actually a digital library exhibit about this speech. And you can look, kind of go more in depth in what we talked about. And you can also see that there are archival collections. So if you actually wanted to read more or see more than the documents that I showed you, you could go here and look at those without leaving your house. And here are, like, this article was written, interesting. Is that when they accessed it? Yeah, so you could probably learn more than you ever wanted to. There's also a history with Milan Revere, and she was there when they were rewriting the speech, and she's got some great things to say about that. And then secondly, I wanted to point out, if it wasn't clear, that the entire speech is on YouTube. So I have it cut, so it only plays
I
that little
believe
clip.
that now on the eve.
But you can actually go on our YouTube channel, which is something, yep, there we go, Clinton Library 42. That is our official YouTube channel. So you can go on there, and if you want to, you can listen to the whole speech from start to finish. All right, more questions.
Yeah, I think it's a quiet group this afternoon, Kathleen. Sometimes we run into that.
And that's okay. I'm gonna tell myself that I answered all of your questions before you could even ask them. That you
exactly.
know as much, possibly more, than you wanted to about the speech.
And you have Kathleen's email address, the library's website, all their social media channels, their hashtag. So Kathleen, is there anything else you want to share with us today that before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, I appreciate being invited. I'm super excited that you are highlighting collections and stories through presidential libraries. Yeah. You know, there are 15 presidential libraries that are part of the National Archives and Records Administration. And what the National Archives and Records Administration is and does is part of what makes our country a democracy. So having access to the records of our government allows us to hold elected and appointed officials accountable. So I say that to every student who walks through these doors. I'm not sure they all understand it. Sometimes it feels like they're more excited about the escalator than they are about the presidency. And I invite everyone, if you're in the area, feel free to drop by. You can ask for me. I'm here 5, sometimes 6 days a week. You can visit us at the Clinton Presidential Library. And I know you've got some great presentations from my colleagues at other presidential libraries coming up. So I encourage everyone to tune in for those as well.
Yeah, that's great. We're taking a little bit of a detour next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday on the 30th at 2 o'clock, we're hosting Lyndon Johnson, teacher, politician, president with the LBJ Library. I don't know if you know the education specialist, Sheila.
I do, Sheila.
Yeah. So
yeah, we all know each other because there's only like a dozen.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. We've actually hosted almost every single one. You know, the two I haven't hosted. Well, we're hosting the Hoover Library next month. That's going to be our first time. But the two that we haven't hosted, Kathleen, maybe you can put in a good word for us, is the George H.W. Bush and the George W. Bush libraries.
Yeah.
So, work your magic.
Yeah. So the education specialist at the George H.W. Bush Library retired.
Yes.
And I don't know if they have filled that position.
I don't think they have.
And then the George W. Bush Library, the George W. Bush Foundation has actually assumed responsibility for running the museum, the volunteer program, the education programs. So I don't know that they have a National Archives education specialist right now either.
I don't think they do. So, and no, it's been a couple of years now. I've been trying with both those libraries. So we'll see. I'll keep plugging away.
who do you have from Hoover? I'm just curious.
So for
you're not gonna be able to
Hoover, yeah, I can tell you that. Give me 1 second. But anyway, folks, we're going to slowly wrap it up here. Look for an email tomorrow with the recording, the feedback survey, and information about some other upcoming virtual programs that might be of interest. So you'll be receiving that tomorrow morning. Yeah.
We have a Q&A asking for my email address. It is on the screen, but I will send it to everyone in the chat. It is just my name, which is Kathleen.Pate@nara.gov. So that's Kathleen.Pate. That's not a 2. That should be an @ Hang on. I cannot type and talk at the same time. There is my email address in the chat. And if for some reason you can't see it or you lose it, if you go on our website, I also received the email that goes to clinton.education@nara.gov.
All right, so let's give Kathleen one last big virtual round of applause. Thanks so much, Kathleen. Kathleen, the name of the speaker from the Hoover Library is their supervisory archivist, Craig Wright. Okay.
Got it. Got it. Craig is great. I'm not sure that they currently have an education specialist.
Right. Yeah. I'm learning all these things as I go. But anyway, he's helping us out. So I'm crossing Hoover off the list. Now it's the 2 Bushes. Obama and Trump don't have their museums up and running yet, or libraries up and running yet. Yeah. So anyway, thanks so much, Kathleen, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You as well. Thanks.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.